It was the summer of 1922, a season shimmering with promise and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and the distant hum of jazz, drifting from open windows into the warm night. This was an era of glittering parties and easy money, where fortunes were made overnight and lost just as quickly. Every evening, the world seemed to sparkle with possibility, and every night, the city pulsed with energy and excess. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. In West Egg, Long Island, the nights were filled with music and laughter that felt desperate, as if everyone was dancing to keep some unspoken fear at bay. Every weekend, a parade of gleaming cars streamed toward one mansion blazing with light, Gatsby's. The house stood like a beacon, drawing in the hopeful, the curious, and the reckless. No one really knew Gatsby, but everyone knew his parties and the wild rumors about him. Whispers of bootlegging, lost loves, and mysterious fortunes swirled through the crowd, growing more elaborate with every retelling. The air in West Egg was thick with secrets and suspicion. Every smile hid a calculation, every gesture a potential betrayal. Trust was a rare currency, and everyone seemed to be playing a part. The glamour was a shield, distracting from the rot beneath. At the center was Gatsby's mansion, a stage for a drama that promised tragedy, where every dazzling light cast a long, dark shadow. Across the bay, East Egg's old money families watched with a mix of contempt and fascination, their eyes fixed on the spectacle, never realizing the desperation fueling it all. They clung to their traditions, wary of the new money rising across the water. The two eggs were separated by water, but worlds apart in values, history, and ambition. The bay was more than a physical divide. It was a chasm of dreams and disappointments. This isn't just a story about parties and lost love. It's a case about a man who built an empire on lies, illusions, and the hope that the past could be rewritten. I'll take you back to that summer, to piece together the evidence, the rumors, and the key players who shaped the fate of West Egg. Every clue brings us closer to the truth behind the legend. The witness, an outsider who thought he was just renting a small house, unaware he'd become the chief observer in a spectacular collapse. He would soon realize that in West Egg, no one remains a bystander for long. My name is Nick Carraway. I suppose you could say I've always been more of an observer than a participant, someone who stands just outside the circle, watching the world unfold with a certain quiet curiosity. I came east for a fresh start, leaving behind the familiar rhythms of the Midwest. New York promised excitement, opportunity, and perhaps a chance to reinvent myself. The city's energy was electric, its possibilities endless, and I was eager to see what I might become. I found a modest cottage to rent in West Egg, a place that felt both humble and out of place among the sprawling estates that surrounded it. My little house was tucked away, almost swallowed by the wild garden, a quiet refuge in a neighborhood of extravagance. My neighbor's place was a palace, Gatsby's house. At first he was just a name, a legend whispered about in the city's most exclusive circles. I watched his home ignite with light and sound, a carnival every weekend, the air pulsing with laughter and jazz. The mansion seemed to come alive at night, drawing people from all corners of New York. I was the outsider, observing the endless parade of strangers treating his home like a public park. The guests were mysteries, loud, beautifully dressed, weightless, as if they floated from one dazzling moment to the next without ever touching the ground. I watched them from the shadows, wondering what drew them here and what they hoped to find. They consumed his hospitality and vanished, leaving behind broken glass and rumors. Who was Gatsby? Why these parties? It felt less like celebration, more like a search for something lost or unattainable. The aftermath was always the same: silence, debris, and the lingering scent of expensive perfume. Then, a formal invitation arrived. Rare, personal, Gatsby had singled me out. That night, I crossed the lawn and stepped into his world, my heart pounding with anticipation and uncertainty. I was no longer just a spectator, I was being drawn into the story. Inside, the chaos was even greater. The air buzzed with speculation. Was he an Oxford man, a killer, a bootlegger? The guests traded stories as if they were currency, each tale more outrageous than the last. The truth seemed to slip further away with every whispered rumor. The stories were fantastical, contradictory. Gatsby was a man made of smoke and whispers, deliberately cultivating mystery. He moved through the crowd like a ghost, always present but never fully seen, his smile both inviting and impenetrable. He kept people close enough to serve his purpose, but far enough to hide the truth. I realized I wasn't just at a party. I was at the center of a massive intelligence-gathering operation. Every guest was a potential informant, every conversation a clue. The case was no longer distant. I was now a person of interest. The mission was unclear, but I was already involved. The investigation had begun, and I sensed that nothing in Gatsby's world was left to chance. I was no longer just the man on the outside, I was part of the mystery itself. Gatsby's parties were masterclasses in deception. On the surface, wealth, generosity, endless food, music, and drink. But look closer. The guests didn't know or care about their host. Laughter was sharp, smiles brittle, chaos carefully managed. Fights broke out, affairs began and ended, all under the guise of celebration. The scale felt like a cover-up. No one throws parties like this just to be a good host. This was strategy, a baited hook for one specific person. Gatsby moved through the crowds like a ghost, rarely drinking, always watching. He scanned faces, searching for someone. The spectacle was misdirection, hiding the real questions. Where did the money come from? Who was Gatsby? The parties were camouflage for an all-consuming obsession. They weren't celebrations of the present, but desperate attempts to recapture the past. The glamour was a weapon, aimed at someone just across the bay. I was beginning to see the truth behind the mask. Who was Jay Gatsby? That was the mystery that haunted every whispered conversation and every curious glance. He was a man shrouded in rumors, his true self hidden behind a carefully constructed mask. The man I met was polished, formal, always calling everyone old sport with a charming smile. He moved through his glittering parties like a phantom host, always present but never truly known. He claimed inherited wealth, an Oxford education, and even war hero status, complete with faded photographs and medals as proof. Every detail seemed designed to impress, to convince us of his legitimacy. But his story was rehearsed, and there were slips, moments when his confidence faltered, when the mask nearly slipped. Phone calls from Chicago and Philadelphia changed his tone. The Oxford man would vanish, replaced by someone sharper, colder, as if another persona lurked beneath the surface. Meyer Wolfsheim, his associate, hinted at criminal connections, speaking in riddles about dangerous business and old debts. The truth emerged. Gatsby wasn't even his real name. The identity he wore was as fragile as the paper it was written on. He was born James Gatz, a poor farm boy, reinventing himself at 17 with nothing but ambition and dreams of greatness. He hadn't inherited money. He earned it through organized crime, likely bootlegging and other shadowy enterprises that thrived in the darkness of prohibition. The mansion was a stage set, the parties a lure for the rich and powerful, all paid for with dirty money and desperate hope. Gatsby was a fraud, living under an assumed identity, haunted by the fear of exposure and the weight of his own lies. The real James Gatz was buried beneath silk shirts and polite phrases, hidden under layers of luxury and pretense. A man who built his world on a lie would do anything to protect it, no matter the cost or the danger. The mystery of his past was a warning, not just a curiosity, a reminder that the past can never truly be erased. I realized then that the danger was real, and that the ghost in the machine was not just Gatsby, but the secrets we all try to hide. Across the bay, East Egg's drama was just as steeped in deception. Daisy and Tom Buchanan's house was beautiful, but inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Tom was arrogant and domineering. Daisy, captivating but deeply unhappy. Her charm was a defense, her sadness a tool. She knew Tom was cheating, his mistress called during dinner. Daisy was trapped in a gilded cage, a prisoner of wealth and social position. Their marriage was a web of secrets and betrayals. Daisy played the perfect wife but yearned for something lost. Tom's infidelity was an open secret. Daisy's restlessness made her reckless. They were bound by history, not love, careless people who retreated into their money. Gatsby's entire operation targeted this house of lies. He wanted to extract Daisy, erase her life with Tom, but Tom was powerful, and Daisy was more complicated than Gatsby realized. Gatsby was aiming his dream at a fortress, not a fairy tale. Gatsby's motive snapped the mystery into focus. He wanted a reunion with Daisy. They'd loved each other before the war, but she married Tom for his fortune. Everything Gatsby built, the mansion, the parties, was for her. He watched the green light at the end of her dock, obsessed with recapturing the past. This wasn't love, it was fixation. He believed he could erase 5 years and start over. As Gatsby and Daisy's affair began, tension escalated. Tom noticed, grew suspicious, and started investigating Gatsby's past. It became a silent war, old money versus new money, both fighting for Daisy. The danger was palpable. Tom watched with contempt. Gatsby grew desperate. Daisy was caught in the middle. She was a pawn in a deadly game she helped create. The affair was a tightrope walk over disaster. Something violent was bound to happen. The confrontation was inevitable. The breaking point came on the hottest day of the summer. The 5 of us, Gatsby, Daisy, Tom, Jordan, and I, ended up in a suite at the Plaza Hotel. The room was a pressure cooker. Tom turned on Gatsby, exposing him as a bootlegger and a fraud. He tore down Gatsby's carefully built identity, revealing the desperate farm boy beneath. Gatsby fought back, insisting Daisy never loved Tom and would leave him. He demanded Daisy erase her past, but she couldn't. "You want too much," she cried. For Gatsby, it was never enough. The dream died in that hotel room. Defeated, Gatsby drove Daisy home in his car, Tom's final act of humiliation. They were two broken people fleeing disaster. But the real disaster waited in the Valley of Ashes. A woman ran into the road. There was a sickening thud. The car never stopped. The collision was not just metaphorical. Tragedy had arrived. The consequences were set in motion. The woman killed was Myrtle Wilson, Tom's mistress. Gatsby's yellow car struck her, but Daisy was driving. Gatsby, in a final act of devotion, took the blame. He waited for Daisy's call, his mask shattered. Meanwhile, George Wilson, Myrtle's husband, was consumed by grief and suspicion. Tom pointed Wilson toward Gatsby, knowing Daisy was the real driver. It was a cold act of self-preservation. The next day, Gatsby waited by his pool, clinging to hope. Wilson found him, raised his revolver, and fired. The final, fatal shot echoed across the empty grounds. Wilson then turned the gun on himself. The case was closed by violence, not justice. Gatsby's death was barely a ripple. Almost no one came to his funeral. Daisy and Tom vanished, insulated by money. The Great Gatsby died alone, a victim of his own incorruptible dream. In the end, I was the only one left to piece it all together. The police called it a murder-suicide, but I knew the truth was more complex. Daisy's role, Tom's deadly lie, the crowd's complicity, all were buried. They used Gatsby, then abandoned him when reality turned ugly. My life in the East was tainted by this knowledge. The promise of New York was hollow, built on moral decay. I couldn't unsee what I'd witnessed. The world of wealth and privilege was a spiritual wasteland. Before leaving for the Midwest, I visited Gatsby's empty mansion one last time. I thought about his hope, his dream, always just out of reach. It wasn't just his story. It was about all of us, chasing a future that recedes before us. We are all boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Gatsby's case was closed, but the haunting questions remain.